I want to simplify his question a little bit and be like, what was a failure that you had?
Painful, life-crushing, debilitating experience of your life.
And how did you come back from it?
Dusty, I don't know who you are. I don't know where you are, but I feel you, brother. I love you. My guess is the presupposition from the question is you're dealing with some shit right now. And I think it's such a relevant question to the world we're living in because there's a lot of shit popping off.
Mm-hmm.
There's wars around the world. There's angst and anxiety and fear. And a lot of people are struggling. You know, I just saw the statistic that there's the highest level of consumer credit card debt in the history of the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a relevant time to talk about it. What is something that you really struggled with, Spence? What is like a very painful experience and how did you get through it?
Yeah. How much time do we have?
3 minutes. Go.
I mean, I've had a lot, right? I think as we grow, the more time on Earth, the more time you have to fail, and so I can pick a bunch of them. But I think the biggest one and how I got through it was just extreme ownership and accountability. That it was 100% my fault, the situation that I was in, and 100% committed to correcting it and growing and evolving into a man that could grow out of that situation. And one of the hardest things, I think, when you're trying to commit to anything or change anything, it's easy to say, oh, I'm 99% in, I'm 98% in. Well, that's a fucking failure because either you're all the fuck in or you're all the way out. So whatever you're trying to grow through, for me, I mean, relating back to Dusty's question, it's like, just commit and burn the fucking boats and raise your standards to a level that you will accept nothing less than the man that requires you to be and having no other options. And if you make that commitment, it's amazing what you can do when you really have no other options. Whether it's a relationship that you're committing to, whether it's a business you're committing to turning around, you have that one fucking goal and you never fucking back down away from it and there's no other options and nothing, in my opinion, nothing is out there that can stop you from accomplishing that and growing through that. It takes a lot of fucking work.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to happen on its own. You have to put in the work to fucking evolve. But
yeah, I
that
think so.
commitment.
I think you touched on three very, very important things that I want to start my answer with is like the way that you get out of it is radical responsibility, complete ownership. This is my fucking fault. I did this. I have to own it and move on.
No one's going to save me.
Yeah. So I think that's like anytime you find yourself in a really difficult position, whether or not like oftentimes I think I didn't do that. It's not my fault. That happened. You know, this was a ripple effect of this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, you might not have been responsible for it, but you're responsible to it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is you always have to take accountability and responsibility for the way that you let that event impact and direct your life. So it might not have been something of your direct doing, but you still have to take responsibility for it happening in your life and then manage forward from that point. So for me, the entry point into changing is always radical responsibility. This is my fucking fault and I have to own it. And then from that point, it gives you the power to move through it, to overcome it. But if you're blaming other people, if you're a victim, they have the power over you because they're doing it to you. But if you take ownership of it, you're taking the power back and now it's your responsibility because it's your fault. And that gives you the capacity to then move through it. So that's number one. Number two is we get what we tolerate in life. So correcting that mistake comes down, I believe, to the standards that you set for yourself, which is what you talked about, Spence. This is who I'm going to be, and I'm not going to fucking waver, and I'm not ever going to allow myself to settle for less than what I know I should be or can be. And then the third one is I think discipline is one of the greatest superpowers we can develop in our life. It's a muscle, and you develop it by flexing it, right? It's like you go to the gym and you train your body, you have to train your discipline the same way. And so to me, the way that I've worked my way out of my most fucked up situations are taking radical responsibility and complete ownership, realizing that it was low standards that allowed that mistake to happen. And then finally, developing the discipline required to work through it. With that said, I think, so my biggest quote catastrophe in life was in the business arena. At this point in my life, I've had way more business experience than a lot of other areas of my life. I don't have a serious relationship or anything like that. So for me, the most painful experiences have come from business. And I went from a place of bankruptcy to like making a couple $1,000,000 and feeling like I had finally arrived and I made it and I could do no wrong. And then I made a series of very bad strategic decisions and lost everything. And at one point in time, I'd sold a couple of companies and had $500,000 in cash in my bank and was like, I'm the fucking man. I made it. I got this shit figured out. And then over 9 months, I lost everything. So I started from bankruptcy, nothing, built it all the way up to where I was a, quote, millionaire. I'd made money, right? And then I'd lost everything. And I remember I was sitting there like afraid to admit that I was afraid because I didn't know how I was going to build it back. And I couldn't wrap my head around how I allowed myself to make those very shitty decisions along the way. And the truth is, it was the fact that low standards allowed me to make those decisions, but it was also ignorance because I didn't know what I didn't know. And I say that because I think oftentimes as men, especially, like no one can really beat us up as much as we can beat ourselves up, right?
That's true.
And
I second that.
and sometimes we have to give ourselves compassion for what we don't know that we didn't know. And so in this process, like, yes, you got to take radical responsibility. Yes, you have to raise your standards. Yes, you have to have discipline. But also, and this is where I think grace comes in, is you have to be honest with yourself and say, was this a mistake of ignorance? Or was this just me doing something I know I shouldn't have done? And if it's you know you shouldn't have done it, then that's where the standards and the personal accountability and responsibility come in. If it's a mistake of ignorance, like we don't know what we don't know until we know it. And so I think that dwelling on that actually holds us back more than most other things in life. And we've been there where we've made a big mistake and we've just beat ourselves up over and over and over. And that will keep us stuck and hold us back more than almost anything else. So I think the secret ingredient here is being honest with yourself about why the mistake happened, and then having compassion with yourself and allowing some grace to work in your life, because our biggest setbacks create our greatest opportunities. And the reason why we have built such a successful company at Live Bearded is we are great partners and we have complementary skill sets. But I can guarantee you the only reason why I've been able to lead this company as a CEO to the direction and to where we're at is because I went through that pain and I lost everything. And I was like, I will never, ever allow myself to make these mistakes again. And so working together, we've very specifically done things that I did then that we will never do now. And that grace part is knowing that obstacles lead to opportunities, and that our most painful moments create our biggest growth, our biggest opportunities to evolve. And so radical responsibility, higher standards, discipline, and then grace.
The only thing I might add, I think when you hit rock bottom, it's interesting because you have no other option but to burn the boats. Sometimes it's harder when you're in that middle ground space. And if you're struggling to change behavior, I think one of the easiest ways to do that is change your environment. We've all heard it. Your net worth is your network. The people you surround yourself with, and you talk about accountability, like sometimes it's hard as individuals to reflect and say like, oh, I need to step up here. But when you surround yourself with valued men with high fucking standards that will call you out on your shit and elevate you, that's going to help you through that process. So going back to Dusty's question, I feel like take a look at who you're hanging out with. Like, are they pulling you down, or are they motivating you to step up and be a better man? And sometimes we can rely on our, the people in our corner to support.
Find a group of men that have less tolerance for bullshit in their life, and give them permission to call your ass out and hold you accountable. And then when they do, thank them.
100%.
Know that it's coming from a position of love.
100%.
And we've done that to each other over the course.
Again.
I mean, we've been friends since 2006.
Yeah.
17 years.
2006. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to have that for sure. Have that. So I think it's a beautiful question, and I think it's an important conversation to have. And I appreciate Dusty asking.
Yeah. Thanks, Dust.